This, for you ladies and gentlemen, is a culinary anthropologist, a food historian, a food archaeologist, who has actually given me the privilege of calling him by his first name. Here's welcoming Jalwai Jalal, Kurush Dalal.
Thank you. So, very sweet of you, Varun. It's like a really warm welcome, and I know you mean it.
Kurush, a lot of people, of course, know you as somebody who dabbles into culinary anthropology, into food archaeology. You are a professor as well. I want to know the Kurush Dalal that people do not know of. Your childhood, your early memories about being Kurush Dalal.
There's two major verticals for that. My maternal grandmother was from a small village on the Gujarat-Maharashtra border, and all my vacations were spent with her.
Sure.
Food that would have not otherwise been such an important part of my life was there thanks very much to her. From the most simple things to the most, intriguing things, to things with flavors that I had never considered before. Food which was honest, but which had a lot of hard work in it. Food which required a lot of slow cooking. Criterion stoves with wicks and long chimneys where fish would fry for 45 minutes.
Wow.
So that was one side. The other side was growing up in VT. My mother was an archaeologist and had started a catering business. And I grew up on all the wrong stories. So when everybody else had regular children's stories to grow up on, I had Alexander's invasion, Ashoka Maurya coming to the throne, his hands covered in the blood of his brothers and stuff like that. So many years later, I wondered, that if she'd been around, I'd have gone and asked her, what was wrong with you? But so it was not really much of a regular upbringing as such.
But having said all of that, you've done so much in the pandemic. You literally did the whole alphabet of food. I was one of the guests in that, watching you and trying to learn from you every day. And I also believe the fact, and I say that with absolute unabashed positivity, that Ria, your better half, has always been a staunch supporter of whatever you do, and vice versa.
If it wasn't for her, that A to Z wouldn't have happened.
Is it?
I was crawling up the walls and driving her nuts. And then she finally said, why didn't you start doing these lives and get onto it, and what could you do? And so we spent one afternoon brainstorming a little bit, and then the next thing you knew, we started the A to Z of food.
How nice. And that was lovely. That was like a discourse in its own rights. And somewhere I remember I made a call to you and I said, Kurush, time to put it on YouTube and time to kind of monetize it and I had time to do lots of things about it. Because that was like a lot of free gyan that you were, in a way, spreading. I think the teacher in you just wanted to do that.
Also, I felt that so many people are sitting at home and basically getting bored to tears.
I agree.
If we could educate and at the same time entertain, then why not? And Varun, I've had some amazing people write into me and say things like, that waiting for your live every afternoon was the one bright spot of our day.
How lovely.
And you kept me sane through the pandemic. There's this girl who wrote to me who said, I lost my eyesight in the pandemic. And the only thing that I look forward to every day was listening to you in the afternoon.
How lovely.
Man, I broke down into tears.
Kurush, what is food like at the Dalals?
So we eat some very interesting Bengali food that most Bengalis don't eat today, which comes out of a lot of the older Bengali texts.
Lovely.
So that's been a complete revelation. So a couple of years back, we did this thing called Amer Luchi.
Sure.
Puri, made without any water in it. You basically use coconut milk, a little bit of khoya, and mango pulp to make the dough, and then you deep fry them in ghee.
Oof.
There's a lot of sandwiches because we get a little bored of food, and this pandemic totally did it for us.
I can agree.
One meal a day and sandwiches. So very often, one meal would be just simple sandwiches. So we experimented with a lot of bread, a lot of spreads. What can we put inside? What is available? Kya mil raha hai? Kya nahi mil raha hai? Somebody's doing pastrami, somebody's doing ham. So that has been another kind of big thing. We're both very particular about the coffee we like to drink. So we have her coffee, his coffee.
And us.
No us. Coffee.
No us. No us.
If it's us, it's her coffee, that's our coffee. So these are the fun things, and meals are usually simple. It's not multi-course, elaborate meals unless...
I think that's the right way to eat as well. Kurush, that brings me very quickly to our next segment, which is a rapid fire. All get up. Funniest historical food fact that is actually true.
So Bhindi Bazaar is called Bhindi Bazaar not because it's behind the bazaar, not because they sold okra over there, but because there was a large orchard over there of hibiscus flowers. And hibiscus is called Bhindi.
Wow. Wow.
So yeah.
I think that's the end of the rapid fire. Your view on food historians in India.
I personally think there are only three.
Okay.
Musina Mukadam, Pushpesh Pant,
I love them
and Vikram Doctor.
And Kurush Dalal.
No, Kurush Dalal is a culinary anthropologist. A food historian, a very serious bugger.
Yeah.
Okay, who really understands deep dives into history of each and everything. I'm not. So I'm very happy to step back and say I'm a kind of juggler of all parts of studying food.
Yeah.
These guys are serious food historians.
One story which has become a fact over the years.
So there are so many of this. First of all, there is this whole thing that biryani is always only mutton.
Sure.
Whereas biryani is actually a process, a technique. It's got nothing to do with this thing. The original biryani in Persia doesn't even have rice.
Sure.
It's served on a paratha with a paste of meat and biryan, which is fried onions.
Fried onions.
So fried onions and meat cooked together with rice became something that the army was being fed. It was easy to make it in the morning, feed it in the afternoon, still hot in a day.
One indigenous Indian superfood.
Bear.
Oh, lovely.
Nothing competes with bear.
The Indian jujubes.
The Indian jujube, Ziziphus mauritiana. The Indian bear we've been finding since the Neolithic period in archaeological sites. It's something that provides vitamin C, iron, a host of other minerals. And by the way, it has more vitamin C than most lemons do.
Which came first? And I'm opening a can of worms here. The batata vada or the Portuguese?
So the Portuguese came first because they brought the batata with them. And the batata actually didn't really become very popular during the Portuguese time. The first mention of potatoes seriously is in a Maharashtrian cookbook of the 16th, 17th century. And it's kind of also their vegetable. It's the British who really pop it up. And the batata vada becomes famous thanks to the British having it grown for the army. So this was what the army ran on, the British army ran on. And they had it grown and apna desi people said, "Ye solid item hai yaar khane ko. Make everything out of this." And the batata vada preceded the vada pav by a long shot.
Sure.
So I still remember going down to Prakash and making fun.
Which is at Dadar.
Yeah. And asking for
Pav.
after getting the vada, and then being absolutely abused in fluent Marathi for the next 3 minutes.
Sure, I'm sure. I've heard it all.
Yes. And the fact that the apocryphal story that in the 70s it was outside the other station actually makes a lot of sense. Because there's no mention of vada pav before Ashok Vaidya puts that vada into his omelette wala's pav next door and gives it to people because it's easier to hold a hot vada while catching a train.
How interesting.
Simple things. Sometimes it's so organic, the development of a dish, that we don't even think about it.
But if you think about it, it's a set of simple ingredients coming together and creating absolute magic.
And almost none of the ingredients are really Indian.
Yeah, please spell it out.
So
That's the end of rapid fire, by the way. Kurush, go all out.
So pav is not just Portuguese because of the pav, but the name itself. So wherever the Portuguese went, pav and bao are the two names that are used for bread.
Sure.
Because that's what the Portuguese call it, pav. The potato came from the New World. The chilies came from the New World. The chickpea flour from outside came from West Asia. The garlic came from Central Asia. So all that is left at the end of the day is the haldi and your mustard seeds.
Yeah.
And your curry leaves, which are Indian. So the Indian component of a vada pav is really small, but yet the vada pav is a quintessential West Indian dish.
If you were to redesign a superhero with a foodie's superpower, which would it be?
Masala man.
Masala man?
Yeah. He spices up your food and your life.
And maybe he has chilies as a crown or something like that.
No, he has this utility belt, which has got masala bottles on it. Okay? And his weapons are a tawata and a whisk.
Okay.
And he can whisk it together anytime for you.
Like just pop in a spice and whisk something. Yeah, fantastic. Alternate career choice for Mr. Kurush Dalal.
Mattress tester. One of the things I really wanted to do, Varun, growing up was I wanted to be somebody called the reader. He reads for those who can't. So I come there and I read, and my last hour I take requests.
Okay.
So I read whatever I want to while I'm sitting there. I'm in installation, and then in the last hour, you can send me a request from the books over there. And because you don't have the time to read,
I'll read
it for you.
It's like a human library.
Absolutely.
So you'd love to be that.
Oh, totally.
So 2 career choices for Kurush Dalal. One, being a mattress tester, which I'm sure you have your reasons to, and being a human library.
Absolutely.
Lovely. That I think is enough for us to wrap this segment. Let's move on to the next one, and that is a whisk taker, ladies and gentlemen. In this segment, what I'm going to do is put the food archaeologist in Mr. Dalal under a spotlight. All get up? Identify which ingredients from these quintessentially Indian dishes are actually not from India. Idli.
So probably the entire idli isn't Indian. There's a lot of debate about where the idli came from.
Sure.
And we believe that some of the techniques that are seen in the idli actually came from Southeast Asia. But what most people in India don't know is that no rice was hurt in the making of the original idli. The original idli was exclusively urad dal. And rice only came down to southern India somewhere around 2,500 years ago and slowly became popular, it became more affordable. And then it was like, yaar ye idli महंगा पड़ रहा है, थोड़ा rice डाल दो अंदर, थोड़ा और rice डाल दो अंदर, 1:1 कर दो, 2:1 कर दो, now it is 5:1. So, you know what happens then is that thanks to this rice, this is now mainlining carbohydrate instead of having a complex carb with a decent amount of protein in it.
Wow. I shouldn't have asked you this. A sambar.
Sambar comes from the word samabhara, where all of the different spices are portioned out in advance and there are specific measures where the bhara is taken into consideration to make the sama.
Wow.
So there have been sambars from a very, very long time in southern India and in western India.
Paneer bhurji.
So where do you start? There is, well, a bhurji, which is eggs, and then you vegetarianize it, and then you put paneer into it. Now, a paneer bhurji made with milk that's split at home and you turn it into hung cottage cheese is one thing. But buying expensive pressed paneer and then turning it into bhurji, something that in all probability came in with the Persians into the northwestern part of India. The entire concept of paneer, which is not otherwise a very Indian concept. So it's an interesting thing that we eat.
Pav bhaji.
The origin of the pav bhaji is in the fact that pav was served with whatever bhaji was available to mill workers. That's one pav bhaji.
And this is Mumbai.
This is Mumbai in the 19th century. Sure. Mill workers are working long shifts. You want them to eat something nice. You don't want them to go home. You want them to put in that long shift. So you give them a short break and you give them pav with bhaji. That's one pav bhaji, and everybody thinks that the modern pav bhaji we eat actually comes from there. It doesn't. The modern pav bhaji has capsicum. India never heard of it. The modern pav bhaji has potatoes. India never heard of it. The modern pav bhaji has tomatoes. India never had them. So all these ingredients are basically part of the Columbian exchange, and these are all ingredients put together with leftover vegetables.
Sure.
So in a good Gujarati home, a good Gujarati mother, housewife, whatever you want to call her, would look at the leftover vegetables, boil a potato, cut some tomato, whip the whole thing together, and then do the French thing. Can you imagine a Gujarati housewife rediscovering motre au beurre?
Wow.
So, butter laga dala and kuch bhi khila dala. So, husband comes home tired at the end of the day, give him a hot plate of pav bhaji. And that is the origin of the modern pav bhaji that we eat.
You know, this conversation can just go on and on. Butter chicken.
Oof. So butter chicken is all about leftovers.
Sure.
Butter chicken is, मैंने बहुत सारा तंदूरी बनाया रात को.
क्या करूँ?
अभी क्या करूँ उसका दूसरे दिन dehydrated. साला half of it is going to be like cardboard. Then you do again the very smart thing that only somebody in the food business will figure out. You take a tomato puree, you take a whole bunch of spices, chatpada spices, and you boil the chicken back together. That's basically what you're doing to it. You can add a onion puree to it if you want, optional. And finally in the end, mozzarella or butter or with cream.
Just mask
So
it all
as
up.
long as you put cream and butter into it, so you know it's like chai. Indians used to not drink tea.
Sure.
We were conned into drinking tea. There were tea breaks declared. Nobody wanted to drink it. It was foul. So the tea board actually minuted. Put sugar and milk into it, the Indians will drink anything. ऐसा ही है. Put Amul butter onto it, the Indians will eat anything.
That's not just opening can of worms, that's kicking the Pandora's box in the deep side of the ocean. Which Indian ingredients are not really Indian?
See, that's a bit of a kind of a difficult take. So, an enormous number of foods in India are not originally from India.
Sure.
So, your potato, your chili, your tomato, just for starters, these without which today we can't have most of Indian food. So, these are just the very obvious things. Jaifal.
Yeah.
Jaifal is not Indian.
Which is nutmeg.
Nutmeg.
Yeah.
Your cardamom is not Indian. Long, basically, your
Cloves.
cloves, those are not Indian. And we've all made them so much part of the Indian spice trade. But the most astounding one of all is Rajma. So Rajma came to us from Mexico thanks to the French. So the French had two rather unsuccessful attempts at installing a French emperor in Mexico.
Okay.
Parts of history that are best forgotten, especially by the French, who were very embarrassed about them. What they brought back from there were beans. And these beans that they brought back to Pondicherry made their way to the Himalayas, where the yield was high and there were no natural pests. So these kind of displaced all the dals by saying, "Arey, per acre I'm getting more rajma.
Sure.
Why ever not?"
So that brings us to the end of this segment. Let's move on to the next segment, and that is a myth buster. I want Kurush to quickly bust a few myths. Let's do that.
Okay. So, number one, dals are not protein.
That is the end of this show.
Dals are not protein. Dals are complex carbohydrates. Yes, they have more protein than regular carbohydrate cereals, but dals are not proteins.
Kurush, a household remedy that is actually not effective, but we made a whole prestigious thing around it.
So there are a lot of little things that we do in our lives which are kind of contraindicated.
Sure.
And we do them because they become part and parcel of our traditions. So for example, don't eat dark things, your skin will become dark. Arey bhai, dark is going down this way, how is it going to manifest on my skin? If you have milk and fish together, you will break out into vitiligo.
Oh, that's a big thing.
Yeah, I mean Parsis have been having dahi and machli together forever. The Bengalis have been cooking the dahi and machli and dahi, the doi mach, and absolutely no vitiligo happening because of it. So, this is something that we create a fear of.
One product or ingredient that has actually over the years gotten a very unfair reputation.
Ghee,
Okay.
also vanaspati.
Okay.
So when we had no ghee in India, we chose to have dalda. Dalda became a household name.
Which is hydrogenated.
Now we are finding out that ghee is probably the best thing you could eat.
And I think this conversation can just keep going on and on and on. But unfortunately, ladies and gentlemen, time has a role to play. And we have to wrap this conversation, but we'll take this off camera and off this conversation. But Kurush, an absolute pleasure to have you here.
I cannot thank you enough for inviting me.
Thank you
It's
so
an
much.
absolute joy to come here. and do
You
this.
saying a yes really means a lot.
तुमने पुकारा और हम चले आए.
क्या बात है. Thank you so much, Kurush. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Thank you.